Thanks for the introduction, Jeff. I'm Elaine Nigam. It has been a pleasure to work with Linda Kay to put this service together, and meeting Jeff Wilhelms, who has taken on the role of the Legislative Ministry Liaison for the UU Ocean County Congregation. Thank you all for inviting us to talk about the inspiration, vision, and mission of the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Ministry. As one of the founders, I've been involved in various ways in the legislative ministry since the beginning, when this was just an idea 10 years ago. Let me briefly describe where the UULMNJ came from and how it has been to see it grow. In 2006, in my UU congregation of Princeton, there was an increasing feeling that we were lacking the social activism and community involvement that is our UU historical heritage in the denomination, and which was so prevalent in the 60s and 70s. Then, UUs were involved in civil rights activism, opposition to the Vietnam War, community building programs such as model cities, to name a few. Individually, congregants promoted legislative actions, worked with the League of Women Voters, and were leaders in their municipalities. But there was not a process to work together as UUs that expressed our values and principles. Given this atmosphere, Princeton surveyed congregants and found the legislative ministry to be an exciting commitment in the social justice arena. Reverend Forrest Gilmore, our new minister, was familiar with such a ministry from his previous work in California. We followed our enthusiasm with action by increased pledging that led to setting aside $70,000 to establishing the UULMNJ. In 2007, with a small committee and the charge of exploring interest in New Jersey UU congregations, Doug Rhodes and I started talking to UU community leaders across our state, including yours here, Nancy Lang, and others about the possibility of forming an advocacy network. The overwhelming positive response was the beginning of an evolving legislative ministry. In 2008, after a statewide conference of congregations with 70 attendees, a steering committee began the basics of putting the organizational pieces together for this nonprofit. Congregations were surveyed for priority issues and a process developed to implement advocacy. In 2009, boards were established. In 2010, an executive director was hired and work began. Congregations and individuals began contributing financially and with their time and talents to this endeavor. This is where the legislative ministry came from. We are now a network of the 21 congregations in New Jersey, totaling about 4,000 UUs. We now have a structure to work together to impact legislation and regulation that promotes our UU values and principles. We now have established a public voice by speaking and writing to lawmakers and state leaders and working with other like-minded organizations. We work as committed individuals and congregations, and most importantly, as a UULMNJ network. Gail Marsh-Saxer, your past president here, served as vice president of the legislative ministry and on the Congregational Relations Committee in the years 2012 and 2013. She brought her expertise, insightfulness, practicality, and the knowledge of New Jersey legislative dynamics and other matters to workshops and board discussions. We loved her and we miss her. People often ask me how it has been to see this advocacy network grow. I knew in general how laws and regulations are made, as many of us do from our high school civics class. I had just retired and I had time. It sounded immeasurably valuable, but I wondered about the many unknowns. Are others interested? Can it be funded and sustained? How would congregations work together? Can we have an impact? So we began, as Martin Luther King's quote, "Faith is taking the first step, even though you don't see the whole staircase." There were many steps to figure out, and with many smart and committed folks to help. And we did get to the top of the staircase, only to see how much work there is to be done. But we know better now how to do it. So it has been an amazing and educational trip. We are recognized by our collaborators, state legislators, and the UUA as a faith-based voice that has impact. We're known for doing our research and showing up to speak. We look forward to seeing how we can work more closely with you here at Ocean County now and in the future. Thank you.
Elaine reviewed the beginnings of UULM and what it was like to be part of the process. I will speak about the importance of the legislative ministry to us as individual UUs and for our congregations. As UUs, we recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, the right of conscience and a democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, respect for the interdependent web of all existence. Those are real principles for us. They inform our thoughts and decisions. We live by them, and importantly for us today, they mandate action. And I would say that they mandate action in the public sector, because in this complicated world, we must act to change the system in which we live. We must try to change the laws that are so influential in our lives. I graduated from college in the mid-1960s, in the dark ages, a time when we thought we were going to be able to change the world. We were a bit naive, through social action and legislation. And the legislative ministry still works towards those goals. We give congregations the opportunity to think about legislation in terms of our UU values. We give congregations a chance to tell their legislators what they think and to have an impact on policy, to write letters, make telephone calls, show up at hearings or demonstrations. We give congregations the chance to expand their own social justice mission to become active in public sector decisions. That's different from what individual congregations usually do. We may respond to local needs, but we don't focus on changing the system. As individuals and congregations, we frequently act to support those in need by giving food and financial assistance, and those actions are critical, absolutely critical, but the legislative ministry adds another piece. We're trying to change the political environment, the structure that determines how we live, whether people have a living wage and sick leave, have adequate health care coverage, are subject to unreasonable incarceration, whether energy policy supports a sustainable environment. The legislative ministry gives UU congregations the opportunity to think and act on these issues based on our values. Why do we act? We act because our UU values require us to act. We act due to our belief in the worth and dignity of each person, and we act in community, since that magnifies our actions. The legislative ministry has come a long way in 7 years, and it's important to recognize that. From an idea about, about bringing together the separate congregations into one voice, to a vibrant organization that gives all of us the opportunity to be active in the public sector. There are only around 4,000 Unitarian Universalists in New Jersey, but when there's a demonstration about bail reform in front of the State House in Trenton, UUs were about a quarter of those there. We were unusually well represented. It was like a reunion, actually. It had a very positive feeling. Why do we act? We act because this country is locking people up at amazing rates. And minorities are disproportionately represented, wreaking havoc not only for the incarcerated, for their families who lose homes and livelihood. We act because of our belief in justice, and it requires us to act. Other advocacy groups ask for our involvement because we know that we follow up with action. Our executive director is a recognized speaker who is asked to participate in important conferences and to be present at the signing of the bail reform legislation, for example. She was also asked to participate with Senator Cory Booker in a town meeting on incarceration and race. On marriage equality, based on an appeal to our congregations, we hired someone to specifically work with other religious groups to mobilize for change. Now, as it turns out, the courts made that unnecessary, but we were prepared in communion with other groups to act. And why did we act? We act because respect for individual rights demands that same-sex couples have the right to marry. We worked with the committee to draft legislation on targets for renewable energy and continue to support that legislation. We act because of our respect for the interdependent web of all existence. We organized major letter-writing campaigns on fracking waste, immigration reform, and minimum wage, to name just a few of our issues. We've made strong statements on the structure of Medicaid and argued for a more reasonable program. And we act together, not just as individuals, but through our congregations and in community. The legislative ministry grew from an idea to a real functioning and very effective organization that brings all UUs together to work on legislative action based on our values, the importance of justice, and the importance of individual rights. Again, to return to Sister Simone, when you walk towards community, we become deeply aware of the truth that we're in this together, that we are not separate, that there is no real discernible difference when you get right down to it. We may have different stories to tell, but it's the same hunger, the same desire, the same passion to make a difference in our world, to care for family, to be who we are called to be. If you walk towards trouble, you'll have a lot of people walking with you, and if you do it together, and that's the way it can be done.